All right. Future Massachusetts real estate rock stars.
Mm-hmm.
Let's dive deep into what you absolutely need to know to conquer that licensing exam.
Yes.
We're talking about everything from getting licensed and understanding agency to navigating disclosures and those unique Massachusetts regulations that love to pop up on the test.
Right.
Think of this as your ultimate cram session, hitting all the high points to boost your confidence and get you ready to ace that exam.
Exactly.
And hey, don't forget to check out nightbeforetheexam.com. Even more study resources, practice questions and quizzes tailored specifically for the Massachusetts exam. It's like having a secret weapon in your study arsenal.
Absolutely. Knowing the ins and outs of Massachusetts real estate law is not just about passing an exam, it's about building a solid foundation for your entire career.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Starting with the gatekeepers themselves. The Massachusetts Real Estate Board. They're all about public protection. So understanding their role is key.
They have a lot of power. Think of them as the guardians of the real estate galaxy.
Oh, wow.
They decide who gets licensed. They investigate complaints, hold disciplinary hearings, and can even impose penalties, including fines and license suspensions.
So basically, don't mess with the board.
Right.
All right, let's get down to brass tacks.
Yeah.
What activities actually require a license in Massachusetts?
Yeah.
I mean, if I'm just helping my aunt sell her condo, do I need a license for that?
It all boils down to whether you're acting on behalf of someone else for a fee.
Uh-huh.
So selling your own property is fine.
Okay.
But the moment you start negotiating deals or offering real estate advice to others for compensation, you're stepping into licensed territory.
Gotcha. And speaking of licenses, what's the difference between a salesperson and a broker?
Okay.
I know this is basic, but it always trips me up.
I get it. It's easy to get those terms mixed up. A salesperson is essentially an apprentice.
Okay.
They need to be sponsored by a broker, work under their supervision, and can't operate independently.
Mm-hmm.
A broker, on the other hand, is the Jedi Master. Right? They have at least 3 years of experience as a salesperson, have passed a tougher exam, and can operate their own brokerage.
So experience really matters when it comes to becoming a broker. It's not just about passing an exam.
Exactly. The 3-year requirement ensures that brokers have a solid foundation of practical experience before they're allowed to supervise others and handle more complex transactions.
And I remember reading something about brokers needing a surety bond. What's that all about?
It's like an insurance policy for clients, protecting them if a broker does something wrong, like mismanaging funds or engaging in unethical conduct, which covers acts of dishonesty.
So if a claim is made against the bond, it comes out of the broker's pocket.
Not necessarily right away. The bonding company would typically cover the claim initially, but then they'd go after the broker to recover those funds. Plus, having claims against your bond is a red flag that can seriously damage your reputation and even jeopardize your license.
Okay. I'm officially feeling the pressure to stay on the straight and narrow.
Right.
So what are some of those red flag activities?
Okay.
Those things we absolutely cannot do as licensees.
Yeah.
I need to make sure I avoid any career-ending moves.
Here are a few big ones to keep in mind.
Right.
First, never ever commingle your personal or business funds with client money held in trust accounts. That's a one-way ticket to disciplinary action.
Okay.
Second, always disclose your interest in a property if you're involved in the transaction.
Mm-hmm.
Transparency is key.
Right.
And third, be extra cautious about dual agency. It's allowed in Massachusetts, but only with informed consent from both the buyer and the seller in writing.
Okay, so those are some serious don'ts. But let's say, worst case scenario, a complaint filed against the licensee.
Yeah.
What happens then?
The board takes complaints very seriously. They'll launch an investigation, and if it's warranted, they'll hold a hearing where the licensee can present their side of the story.
Okay.
If the board finds the complaint valid, the consequences can range from a reprimand to a hefty fine, license suspension, or even revocation.
Wow, so it's really important to know the rules and play by the book.
Absolutely. Your reputation and your livelihood are on the line.
Okay, so we've covered the basics of getting licensed and the importance of staying out of trouble.
No.
Next, we'll dive into the nitty-gritty of navigating real estate transactions, from advertising to commissions to escrow accounts.
Right.
But first, I want to remind you about nightbeforetheexam.com.
Yes.
They have tons of resources specifically designed for the Massachusetts real estate exam, including practice questions that will help you get comfortable with the format and identify any areas where you need to brush up.
It's like having a personal exam prep coach guiding you every step of the way.
Let's shift gears and talk about actually selling some houses.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's say we've got our license.
Yeah.
We're ready to hit the ground running. What's the first thing we need to know about advertising properties?
Fair housing laws are absolutely paramount.
Mhm.
You need to be incredibly careful not to discriminate against any protected classes in your advertising. Massachusetts has even stricter fair housing laws than the federal government, so it's crucial to know the nuances.
Okay, so no steering or discriminatory language.
Got it.
Got it. But give me some real-world examples of what not to do in advertising. The kind of stuff that might trip me up on the exam.
Let's say you're advertising a condo in a complex with a pool.
Okay.
You can't say perfect for families or ideal for young couples. That could be construed as discriminating against families with older children or single individuals. Even seemingly harmless phrases can get you into trouble.
Wow, so I really need to choose my words carefully. What about commissions?
Massachusetts follows the principle of procuring cause, which means the commission goes to the agent who started the chain of events that led to the sale. It's about who initiated the deal and kept it moving forward.
So if I show a property to a buyer and then they end up buying it through another agent,
Yeah.
I could still be entitled to the commission.
Exactly. If you can prove that you were the procuring cause, you have a strong case for getting that commission. Of course, it can get complicated, especially in situations with multiple agents or when a buyer finds a property on their own. That's why having a thorough understanding of procuring cause is so crucial for the exam and for navigating real-world commission disputes.
Okay, so procuring cause. Got it. Now let's talk about escrow accounts, or trust funds as they're sometimes called. Those always sound a little intimidating.
They should. Mishandling trust funds is one of the fastest ways to get into trouble with the real estate board. The rules are strict, and for good reason. You're dealing with other people's money, so it needs to be handled with the utmost care and transparency.
So what are the key things to remember about trust accounts in Massachusetts? What do I need to know to ace those exam questions?
First and foremost, you need a separate trust account in a Massachusetts bank. You cannot commingle those funds with your personal or business money, period. Second, keep meticulous records of all deposits and withdrawals. The board can audit those accounts at any time, so you need to be able to account for every penny.
Yeah.
And third, only use those funds for their intended purpose.
Got it. So separate account, meticulous records, and no funny business. Speaking of being careful, one of the court cases in our study materials, McCarthy Tobin, really caught my attention.
Yeah.
It mentioned that even emails can be legally binding in real estate transactions. Is that really true?
That case was a game changer.
Wow.
It made it crystal clear that even casual emails can be interpreted as legally binding contracts. Think of it this way. In the digital age, your words, even those typed quickly on a smartphone, can have serious legal consequences.
That's a little terrifying.
Right.
So no more firing off quick emails without thinking them through.
Exactly. Always be mindful of what you put in writing, even in seemingly informal communication.
Yep.
Assume that every email you send could end up being scrutinized in court. It's better to be safe than sorry.
Okay, I'm officially taking the think before you type mantra to heart. Now, Massachusetts is known for its love of disclosures. I mean, they're really big on transparency in real estate transactions.
It's all about protecting consumers and ensuring fairness. The state's Consumer Protection Act plays a huge role in this, setting high standards for disclosures in all kinds of transactions, including real estate.
So what exactly constitutes a material fact that I have to disclose? What are the deal breakers that could kill a sale if I don't disclose them?
Think of a material fact as any information that would likely influence a reasonable buyer's decision to purchase a property or affect the offering price.
Okay.
It's not just about physical defects. It also includes things like zoning changes, pending assessments, or even neighborhood issues that could impact the property's value or enjoyment.
Okay, so give me some concrete examples.
Yeah.
What are some must-disclose items that could make or break a deal? I need the kind of scenarios that might pop up on the exam.
Any known issues with the foundation roof or major systems like heating and plumbing. Basically, if it's something that could cost the buyer a significant amount of money down the line, it needs to be disclosed.
What about those stigma things I've heard about? Like if a crime happened in the house or there were rumors of it being haunted. Do I have to disclose those in Massachusetts?
Interestingly, those types of things are generally considered non-material in Massachusetts.
Oh,
You're not legally obligated to disclose them even if you know about them.
really? So even if I knew the house was the setting for a horror movie, I wouldn't have to tell the buyer?
You're not legally required to.
Okay.
Of course, there's always the ethical consideration, but legally, those stigmas are not considered material facts in Massachusetts.
Wow, okay. Good to know. Now, I know lead paint is a huge deal in Massachusetts, especially for older homes. What are the key things we need to know for the exam about lead paint disclosures?
You're right. Lead paint is a major concern, particularly for homes built before 1978. In Massachusetts, sellers are required to disclose any known lead paint hazards, and buyers have a 10-day period to conduct a lead paint inspection at their own expense.
So if lead paint is found, what happens? Does the seller have to remove it?
Not necessarily.
Oh,
If a family with young children is buying, they have the right to request lead abatement, and the seller is generally obligated to comply. However, if the buyer is not a family with young children, they can choose to waive the lead abatement requirement.
so it's really about protecting those most vulnerable to lead paint hazards.
Exactly. It's all about making sure buyers are fully informed and can make the best decision for their families.
Okay, we've covered material facts, stigmas, and lead paint.
Yeah.
What other disclosures are specific to Massachusetts? Those quirky regulations that make this state so special.
Oh, Massachusetts has a few aces up its sleeve. For
Uh-huh.
instance, there's the 6D certificate for condos. This document certifies that the condo owner is up to date on their condo fees and is essential for any condo sale.
Okay.
Imagine explaining that to a buyer from out of state.
Right. They'd probably look at me like I was speaking another language. And speaking of condo quirks, I remember reading about something called the Super Lien Law. What on earth is that, and why should I care?
It sounds more dramatic than it is, but it's pretty important.
Okay.
Basically, if a condo owner doesn't pay their condo fees, the condo association can place a lien on their unit that takes priority over even the mortgage lender. So imagine this. You're a lender, you foreclosed on a condo, and suddenly you realize the condo association has a massive lien that trumps yours. Not a good day at the office.
Whoa, so those condo fees are not to be messed with.
Yeah.
I'll make sure to emphasize that to any clients buying a condo.
Definitely. It highlights the importance of financial responsibility when it comes to condo ownership.
Okay, moving on from condos. What about timeshares? Massachusetts has some specific regulations about those, right?
Absolutely. You need to understand the difference between a timeshare estate, where the owner actually owns a piece of the property for a specific period, and a timeshare license, which just gives them the right to use the property for a certain time.
Okay,
It's a subtle but important distinction.
gotcha. Now, switching gears a bit, let's talk about homestead laws. How do those protect homeowners in Massachusetts?
Homestead laws offer homeowners some protection from creditors.
Okay.
In Massachusetts, a certain portion of your primary residence's value is shielded from being seized to pay off debts.
So it's like a safety net for homeowners, ensuring they don't lose their homes due to unforeseen financial hardship.
Precisely. It's one of the ways Massachusetts law looks out for homeowners.
Now, Massachusetts is known for its beautiful coastline and natural resources. So I'm guessing there are some strict environmental regulations we need to be aware of, right?
You bet. Environmental protection is a major priority in Massachusetts, and there are a number of laws that impact real estate transactions. We've got the Wetlands Protection Act, the Ocean Sanctuaries Act, and even the Stretch Code, which promotes energy efficiency in buildings.
Okay, so let's break those down. First up, the Wetlands Protection Act. What's the key takeaway there?
If a property includes wetlands, you need to be extremely careful about development. Any work done near wetlands requires prior review and approval to ensure it doesn't harm these sensitive ecosystems.
So no building a pool in the middle of a swamp. Got it. What about the Ocean Sanctuaries Act? What's that all about?
It's all about protecting the coastline and marine life. This act designates specific areas as sanctuaries and restricts development that could harm the delicate balance of those ecosystems.
Makes sense. Now, I've heard about the stretch code, but haven't really grasped what it entails. Can you explain it in a way that even I can understand?
Think of it as going above and beyond the basic energy codes. It's about making buildings more energy efficient, reducing their environmental impact, and saving homeowners money on their energy bills in the long run.
So it's a win-win for the environment and for homeowners.
Exactly. It's about building smarter and more sustainably.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground on disclosures and those unique Massachusetts laws. But before we move on to agency relationships, another quick shout out to nightbeforetheexam.com.
Okay.
Their resources will help you solidify this information and gain a deeper understanding of everything we've discussed today.
They truly have thought of everything to help you succeed on that exam.
Now let's dive into the world of agency relationships in Massachusetts real estate. We're in the home stretch of our Massachusetts real estate law deep dive, and today it's all about agency relationships. Now, representing your clients properly is a huge responsibility, both ethically and legally. It's not just about knowing the rules. It's about building trust, understanding your obligations, and navigating those tricky situations that inevitably pop up in the real world.
It's the cornerstone of professionalism in real estate. Understanding those different agency relationships is essential for passing the exam, but even more importantly, for building a successful and ethical career.
All right, let's break it down. Can you walk us through the different types of agency relationships we might encounter in Massachusetts? I need a refresher on those key definitions.
Of course, in Massachusetts, you'll typically encounter three main types of agency: seller agency, buyer agency, and dual agency. With seller agency, you're representing the seller, working to get them the best possible price and terms for their property. In buyer agency, you're on the buyer side, helping them find the perfect property and negotiate a favorable deal.
Okay, so those are pretty straightforward. But dual agency, that's where things get a little fuzzy for me. Isn't there a conflict of interest when you're representing both the buyer and seller in the same transaction?
You're right, it can be a tricky situation. That's why dual agency is only allowed in Massachusetts with informed consent from both parties. The buyer and seller need to understand the potential conflicts and agree to it in writing.
So if I'm representing both sides, how do I ensure I'm being fair and impartial? What are the key things to remember to avoid getting into hot water?
Transparency is key. You need to disclose all material facts to both parties, even if it might seem disadvantageous to one side or the other. You also need to avoid advocating for one party over the other. Your role is to facilitate the transaction and help both parties reach an agreement that works for them.
So no playing favorites or trying to sweeten the deal for one side over the other.
Exactly. It's a delicate balancing act, and it's not for everyone. Some agents prefer to avoid dual agency altogether to steer clear of potential conflicts.
Makes sense. Now, what about designated agency? I've heard that term thrown around, but I'm not quite sure what it means.
Designated agency is a way to minimize conflicts in situations where both the buyer and seller are represented by the same brokerage. In this case, different agents within the brokerage are designated to represent the buyer and seller separately. They act as independent agents, each owing fiduciary duties to their respective clients.
Okay, so it's like having two separate agents working under the same roof, each with their own loyalties. That makes sense. Now let's shift gears to rental properties. What are the essential things to know about landlord-tenant law in Massachusetts? I feel like that's an area where there are always changes and updates.
You're right, landlord-tenant law is constantly evolving. But here are a few key things to keep in mind. First, transparency is crucial. Landlords are required to disclose all fees and charges up front using the tenant fee disclosure form. This includes things like security deposits, application fees, and any other charges beyond the monthly rent.
So no more surprising tenants with hidden fees or last-minute charges.
Exactly. It's all about being upfront and honest from the start. Massachusetts also has strict rules about security deposits. Landlords can only collect a maximum of 1 month's rent as a security deposit, and they must hold those funds in a separate interest-bearing account.
So those security deposits are not just free cash for landlords to use as they please.
Not at all. Those funds belong to the tenant and can only be used for specific purposes, like unpaid rent or damage to the property beyond normal wear and tear.
Okay, good to know. What about lead paint in rental properties? I know that's a big concern in Massachusetts, especially in older buildings.
You're right, lead paint is a serious health hazard, especially for young children. In Massachusetts, landlords are required to disclose any known lead paint hazards to tenants, and they must provide a copy of the state's lead paint safety brochure. If a child under 6 years old is living in the unit, the landlord is generally obligated to de-lead the property.
Wow, so those lead paint regulations are pretty strict in Massachusetts. It sounds like landlords have a lot of responsibilities.
They do, and those responsibilities extend to the eviction process as well. Landlords must follow a specific legal process to evict a tenant, and they can't just kick someone out without proper notice and a court order.
So no more self-help evictions or changing the locks on tenants?
Nope, those days are long gone. In Massachusetts, landlords must file a formal eviction action in court and provide the tenant with proper notice and an opportunity to respond. It's a process designed to protect the rights of both landlords and tenants.
Okay, that makes sense. We've covered a lot of ground today, from agency relationships to disclosures to those quirky Massachusetts regulations that love to show up on the exam. But hey, before we wrap up, don't forget to check out nightbeforetheexam.com. They've got all the tools you need to ace that Massachusetts real estate exam.
Practice questions, study guides, you name it. It's like having a secret weapon in your study arsenal.
So study hard, stay focused, and remember, you've got this. Good luck on that exam.